45a. The Life Stories of the Male Lay Disciples. 1. Tapussa and Bhallika. Aspiration in the Past. I shall describe the story of the brothers, Tapussa and Bhallika, based on the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uggata Nikaya, and the commentary on the verses of the elder monks, Theragatha. The future Tapussa and Bhallika were reborn into a worthy family in the city of Āḷavaka, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. When they were listening to a discourse by the Buddha, they saw two disciples being named as the foremost and being the first of the Buddha's disciples who were established in the refuges. The two brothers aspired to that distinction, and after making an extraordinary offering to the Buddha, they wished for that goal. Other past existences. The two brothers lived a life full of meritorious deeds, and, after passing away from that memorable existence, they were never reborn into the lower worlds, Apaya, but, instead, in the Deva realm or the human world only. The future Bhallika was reborn, 31 eons ago, in a period which was devoid of any Buddhas, as a man who offered all kinds of fruits to a Paksabuddha named Sūramañtha. For that good deed, he was reborn only in the good destinations. During the time of Buddha Sikhi, he was reborn into a Brahmin family in the city of Anāthapiṇḍika. He heard the news that two merchant brothers, Ugata and Uggata, had the opportunity of offering the first alms food to Buddha Sikhi, who had appeared from the 7th 7-day abiding in the attainment in cessation and who was about to begin his 8th 7-day abiding in the attainment of cessation. He went to visit Buddha Sikhi together with his friend, the future Tapussa, and after paying homage to the Buddha, requested him to accept their alms food offering the next day. On the next day, they made an extraordinary offering to the Buddha and said, "Venerable Sir, for this good deed, let both of us have the opportunity of making the first alms food to a Buddha in the future." The two friends were reborn in various existences, during which they performed meritorious deeds together, resulting in rebirth at the fortunate destinations. During the time of Buddha Kassapa, they were born into the family of a cattle merchant. For a long period of life, lasting many years, they offered milk rice to the Sangha. Discipleship in their last existence. The two friends were reborn into the fortunate destinations for the infinite years which constituted the interim period between the two Buddhas. During the time of Buddha Gautama, before the Buddha attained perfect awakening, they were reborn as two sons to a traveling merchant who carried his goods, using a big caravan, from place to place. Their native town was called Āsatinkana. The elder brother was named Tapussa, and the younger, Bhallika. They became householders and carried on the trading together, using a caravan of 500 bullock carts. At that time, Buddha Gautama had attained perfect awakening and had passed 7 times the 7 days of abiding in the attainment of cessation, and was about to enter into the 8th 7-day period of abiding in the attainment of cessation at the foot of a Rajyatana tree. The caravan of the two merchant brothers was then not far from that tree. At that moment, a deva who had been the mother to the merchant brothers in the immediately previous existence, saw the dire need of the Buddha for sustenance, who, after having last taken Sujata's milk rice in 49 morsels over 49 days, must eat that day for his survival. She thought that her two sons should be able to provide the food just in time. So, using her psychic powers, she made the bullocks unable to move. The two brothers inspected the bullocks, the carts, and all relevant conditions which made the carts immobile. They were at their wits' ends to find the reason. Their Deva mother, seeing them disheartened, possessed a man in the caravan and said to them, "Dear sons, you are not harassed by any Buddha or Pita or Naga, but it is me, a Deva of the terrestrial realm, who was your mother in your last existence, who is doing this. The Buddha, who is endowed with the 10 powers, is staying at the foot of a Rajyatana tree. Go and offer alms food to the Buddha, which will be the first food he takes after becoming a Buddha." The two brothers were delighted by the Deva's word. And thinking that if they were to cook alms food it would take too much time, they took some of their choicest preserved food, put them on a gold salver, and approaching the Buddha, said, "Venerable Sir, may you, out of compassion, accept this food." The Buddha reviewed the situation and considered what action the previous Buddhas did in such a case. The 4 great kings then visited the Buddha and each offered an alms bowl, which was made of granite and having the color of green gram. The Buddha considered the great benefit that would accrue to the 4 devas, and so accepted all the 4 bowls, and placing them one atop the other, willed that the 4 bowls became one, and accordingly, the 4 granite bowls became a single alms bowl with 4 rims. The 2 brothers then put their alms food into the Buddha's alms bowl, and the Buddha ate the food. After the Buddha had finished eating, the brothers offered water for drinking and washing. Then they made obeisance to the Buddha and sat in a suitable place. The Buddha gave them a discourse, at the end of which, both brothers were established in the 2 refuges. The story of the establishment of the 2 brothers in the 2 refuges, Dvasika Saragamana, was described in chapter 8, and is repeated in the following paragraph. The Buddha then received the rice cakes and balls of honey food with that alms bowl and partook of them, and then delivered a discourse of appreciation which was suitable to the merchant brothers. Then the 2 brothers took refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma only, as the treasure of the Sangha had not come into existence at that time, and thereby they became devotees who had only to pronounce the 2-sentence refuge, Devasika Sara, with reference to the Buddha and the Dhamma, saying, Eat Maya Banti, Bhagavanta Sara Gakama Daman Ca, we take refuge, sir, in the Fortunate One and the Dhamma. These 2 were the first devotees in whom the 2-sentence refuge formula was established. After having been established in the 2 refuges, before departing, the 2 brothers requested from the Buddha, Venerable Sir, may the Fortunate One, out of compassion, bestow on us something which we may revere every day. The Buddha passed his right hand over his head and gave them 8 hairs as relics. The brothers put the hairs in a gold casket and took them home. Back at their town, they erected a shrine at the entrance of the town of Asatankana where the 8 relic hairs from the living Buddha were enshrined. On the observance days, Upasatha, the shrine emitted a Buddha radiance. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, when the Buddha was residing at the Jetavana monastery and acknowledging distinguished lay disciples accordingly to their merits, he declared, Etad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsiknapahama saragakantna yad ida tapussa Bhallika vij. Monastics, among my lay disciples who have taken refuge earliest in the Buddha and the Dhamma, the merchant brothers, Tapussa and Bhallika, are the foremost. The attainment of path knowledge. Tapussa and Bhallika were the earliest of the Buddha's lay disciples who took refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma. Later, the Buddha made his first discourse, the Dhamma Wheel, Dhammacakka, at the deer park near Bras. After that, he went and resided in Rajagaha. The 2 brothers also arrived at Rajagaha on a trading journey. They visited the Buddha, made obeisance and sat in a suitable place. The Buddha gave a discourse to them, at the end of which, the elder brother Tapussa was established in stream entry knowledge and its fruition. The younger brother became a monastic and in due time became an arahat and was endowed with the 6 supernormal powers. Anāthapiṇḍika the Rich Man. Aspiration in the past. The future Anāthapiṇḍika was reborn into a wealthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. When he was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a lay disciple being named as the foremost lay disciple among those who delight in generosity. He had a strong desire to become such a distinguished disciple, and after making an extraordinary offering to the Buddha, he expressed his aspiration before him, and it was confirmed. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Anāthapiṇḍika was reborn in fortunate destinations for 100,000 eons, and during the time of Buddha Gautama, he was reborn as the son of Sūramañtha, a rich man of Savatthi. His name, given by his parents, was Siddhartha. Siddhartha in time became the head of the family. He earned the reputation of Anāthapiṇḍika, one who gives food to the destitute. For more details about this remarkable man refer to chapter 20c. Here, only a brief account will be given as described in the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uggata Nikaya. One day, Anāthapiṇḍika went to Rajagaha on a trading trip where he visited his friend a rich man in Rajagaha. There, he learned the news that the Buddha had appeared in the world. He could not wait till the city gates of Rajagaha were open the next morning so he could meet the Buddha. Such was his zeal. So he left the city at dawn with the Devas opening the gate for his visit. He met the Buddha, benefited from a discourse by him, and was established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. On the next day, he made a great offering to the Buddha and his Sangha and had the Buddha's consent to visit Savatthi. He returned to Savatthi, and on the way back he made arrangements with his friends of each location by providing them with 100,000 pieces of money to build a monastery at an interval of 1 league along the way for the temporary residence of the Buddha and his company of monastics. The distance between Rajagaha and Savatthi being 45 leagues, he therefore spent 4,500,000 on the 45 temporary transit monasteries. At Savatthi, he bought a large park, which was the pleasure garden of Prince Citta. He paid a sum of money according to the number of gold coins laid out over the entire park, with their rims touching each other. This amounted to 180 million. On that piece of land, he built a golden monastery costing another 180 million. At the formal dedication ceremony of the Jetavana monastery, which lasted for 3 months, a lavish feast was provided to guests, both in the mornings and in the daytime. This cost him another additional 180 million. Foremost title achieved. The Jetavana monastery alone therefore cost 540 million. The regular donations to the Buddha and his Sangha consisted of the following offerings. 1. 500 monastics were offered alms food daily by the ticket system, Salaka Bhatta. 2. 500 monastics were offered alms food once during the waxing period of the month and once during the waning period. 3. 500 monastics were offered rice gruel daily by the ticket system. 4. 500 monastics were offered rice gruel once during the waxing period of the month and once during the waning period. 5. Daily offerings of alms food were made to 500 monastics who had arrived in Savatthi recently and who had not acquainted themselves with the daily route for collecting alms food, 500 monastics who were about to go on a journey, 500 monastics who were sick, 500 monastics who tended the sick monastics. 6. There was always a seating place for 500 monastics at any time at Anāthapiṇḍika's house. Hence, on one occasion when the Buddha, while residing at the Jetavana monastery, was acknowledging lay disciples according to their merit, he declared, Itad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsaknadayakna yadida sadato gahapati anthapiko. Monastics, among my lay disciples who delight in giving, Ugga the Householder, also known as Anāthapiṇḍika, is the foremost. The discourse giving advice to Anāthapiṇḍika. Here we shall give a condensed account of the discourse giving advice to Anāthapiṇḍika, Anthapikavda Sutta, which Anāthapiṇḍika liked very much. A full account of this discourse is contained in a collection of the middle-length discourses, Majjhima Nikaya, MN 143. During the Buddha's residence at the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, Anāthapiṇḍika the householder was sick, in pain, and gravely ill. Then he called an attendant and said, Please approach the fortunate one. Prostrate yourself at his feet, and say to him, Venerable Sir, Anāthapiṇḍika the householder is sick, in pain, and is gravely ill. He pays homage with his head at the feet of the fortunate one. Further, approach Venerable Sariputta, and prostrate yourself at his feet, and say to him, Venerable Sir, Anāthapiṇḍika the householder is sick, in pain, and gravely ill. He pays homage with his head at the feet of Venerable Sariputta. And also say thus, Venerable Sir, may Venerable Sariputta, out of compassion, come to the house of Anāthapiṇḍika. When Anāthapiṇḍika was in good health, he usually paid a visit to the Buddha at least once a day, and twice or thrice if he could manage it. But now that he was on his deathbed, he was sending an attendant as messenger. Very well, sir, replied the attendant to Anāthapiṇḍika, and went to the Buddha. He paid homage to the Buddha, prostrating himself at his feet, and said to him as instructed by his master. Then it was nearly sunset, and he next went to Venerable Sariputta, approached him, prostrating himself at his feet, and said to Venerable Sariputta as instructed by his master, requesting the Venerable to visit Anāthapiṇḍika. Venerable Sariputta signified his acceptance by remaining silent. Then, Venerable Sariputta robed himself up, and carrying his alms bowl and double robe, went to the house of Anāthapiṇḍika the householder, accompanied by Venerable Ananda as his attendant in place of another monastic which was the custom. Upon arrival and after taking the seat prepared for him, he asked Anāthapiṇḍika, householder, "Are you feeling well? Are you feeling better? Is your pain decreasing and not increasing? Does it appear to be decreasing and not increasing?" Anāthapiṇḍika replied to Venerable Sāripuṭṭa how he was feeling unwell, how he was not feeling any better, how his pain was increasing and not decreasing, and how it appeared to be increasing and not decreasing, by giving 4 examples. Venerable Sāripuṭṭa knew that the illness of the householder was not controllable but that it would end only with this death. So he considered it important not to talk about anything but to give a discourse that would be of benefit to him. He gave the following discourse in a comprehensive manner: since there is no possibility of checking an ailment which will end only with the death of the sufferer who, being under the influence of craving, conceit and wrong view, is attached to the 6 sense spheres, the 6 sense objects, the 6 kinds of consciousness, the 6 kinds of contact, the 6 kinds of sensation, etc. So he said, "Householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the eye, by way of either craving or conceit or wrong view, which is corporeality with sensitivity of seeing, then the consciousness which is dependent on the eye, through a subtle fondness, nikantita, for the eye will not arise in me." Householder, you should practice the threefold training in this way. Herein, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment to the eye, is said to exhort the householder to view the eye as impermanent, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and unsubstantial, anatta. This is so because if one views the eye as impermanent, conceit cannot gain any foothold, and it cannot arise. If one views the eye as suffering, dukkha, craving and attachment to the eye as my eye, cannot arise. If one views the eye as unsubstantial, the wrong view of a personal identity or the ego as myself cannot arise. Hence, to be free of the misconceptions through conceit, craving and wrong view, one should repeatedly view the eye as impermanent, suffering and unsubstantial. The 3 misconceptions of conceit, craving and wrong view are crude mental states. Even when those misconceptions disappear, there is a subtle fondness, nikantai, for the eye that tends to persist. Venerable Sāripuṭṭa exhorts the householder to have his consciousness freed of this subtle fondness. The same applies to the other 5 sense bases, such as ear, nose, etc., and also to sense objects, etc. Having exhorted Anāthapiṇḍika to train himself to be free of attachment from the eye through conceit, craving and wrong view, and also to have no lingering fondness for the eye, Venerable Sāripuṭṭa further exhorted him as follows: That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the ear, the nose, the tongue, for the mind base, and not even a subtle fondness for the mind. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for visual objects, sounds, odors, tangible objects, mind objects, and not even a subtle fondness for mind objects. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness, and not even a subtle fondness for mind consciousness. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact, and not even a subtle fondness for mind contact. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for sensation arising out of eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact, and not even a subtle fondness for sensation arising out of mind contact. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the element of solidity, the element of cohesion, the element of heat, the element of motion, the element of space, the element of consciousness, and not even a subtle fondness for the element of consciousness. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for corporeality, sensation, perception, volitions, consciousness, and not even subtle fondness for consciousness. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the absorption, jhana, of the infinity of space, the infinity of consciousness, nothingness, neither consciousness nor non-consciousness, and not even a subtle fondness for the absorption of neither consciousness nor non-consciousness. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the present world, then the consciousness which is dependent on the present world, through a subtle fondness for the present world, will not arise in me. Householder, you should practice the threefold training in this way. That being so, householder, you should practice thus: I will have no attachment for the hereafter, then the consciousness which is dependent on the hereafter, through a subtle fondness for the hereafter, will not arise in me. Householder, you should practice the threefold training in this way. From the first to the 8th round of exposition, the sentient world is being referred to. In the last, 9th round, the present world refers to volitions related to dwelling, food and raiment and other possessions. The hereafter means all forms of existence beyond the human existence. Venerable Sariputta, by mentioning the hereafter, hints that the householder should not crave for grand mansions, gorgeous food and raiment, etc., in any of the celestial worlds. Thus Venerable Sariputta gave a comprehensive discourse in 9 turns on the same theme. It may be noted that the 3 roots, craving, conceit and wrong view, are completely eliminated on becoming an arahat. Of the 3, wrong view is eradicated when stream entry knowledge is gained. Venerable Sariputta repeatedly exhorted Anāthapiṇḍika to practice so that no attachment to anything arises in the mind through any of these misconceptions. This connotes that becoming an arahat should be the goal. This theme he impressed on the householder by 9 different factors: sense spheres, sense objects, consciousness, contact, sensation, elements, aggregates, absorption of the formless realm, and all things, sabadhamma, knowable. The voidness, the emptiness, the unreality of these phenomena is comprehended when one becomes an arahat. When the discourse had ended, Anāthapiṇḍika wept bitterly. Then Venerable Ananda said to Anāthapiṇḍika, Householder, are you attached to your possessions? Householder, are you wavering about your meritorious deeds? Venerable Sir, replied Anāthapiṇḍika, I am not attached to my possessions. Nor am I wavering. I have indeed, for a long time, attended upon the Fortunate One. I have also attended upon the monastics who are worthy of respect. But, I have never heard such words of Dhamma before. Householder, the laity who wear white cloths cannot easily understand this word of the Dhamma. For lay persons it is not easy to follow the exhortation to break away from dear ones, such as wife and children, and various other possessions, such as valued attendants, fertile fields, etc. Householder, this word of the Dhamma can be understood easily only by monastics. Venerable Sariputta, I beg of you. Let this word of the Dhamma be made clear to the laity who wear white cloths. Venerable Sir, there are many worthy men whose understanding is not clouded by the dust of defilements. For them, it is a great loss in not being able to see the supramundane through not having heard the Dhamma. There are likely to be people who will be able to fully understand the Dhamma and become arahats, if only you expound the Dhamma to them. I have never heard such words of the Dhamma before. These words spoken by Anāthapiṇḍika needs to be explained. It is not that the householder was never before admonished by the Buddha using words of the same profound meaning. But the doctrine leading to becoming an arahat expounded by means of such a comprehensive arrangement involving 9 different rounds, such as the 6 sense spheres, the 6 sense objects, the 6 kinds of consciousness, the 6 elements, the aggregates, the 4 absorptions, jhana, of the formless realm, the present world and the hereafter, through all manner of knowing them, through seeing, hearing, attaining, cognizing, has never been taught him before. To explain in another way, charity and the delight in giving is the hallmark of Anāthapiṇḍika's character. Never would he pay a visit to the Buddha or to monastics worthy of respect empty-handed. In the mornings, he would take gruel and edibles to them, in the afternoons, ghee, honey or molasses, etc. Even on some rare occasions when he had no offering to make to them, he would take his attendants along, carrying fine sand with them, which he let them spread about the monastic compound. At the monastery, he would make his offering, observe the precepts, and then go home. His noble behavior was reputed to be one worthy of a bodhisattva. The Buddha, during the 24 years of his association with Anāthapiṇḍika, mostly praised him for his generosity. I had practiced generosity over 4 incalculable periods and 100,000 eons. You are following my footsteps. Great disciples, like Venerable Sariputta, usually discourse to Anāthapiṇḍika on the benefits of giving in generosity. That is why Venerable Ananda said to him, "Householder, the laity who wear white clothes cannot easily understand this word of the Dhamma," with reference to the present discourse by Venerable Sariputta. This should not be taken to mean that the Buddha never discoursed to Anāthapiṇḍika on the cultivating of insight, leading to path knowledge and its fruition. In fact, the householder had heard the need for insight development. Only that he had never listened to such an elaborate discussion running to 9 rounds as in the present discourse. As the sub-commentary on the discourse giving advice to Anāthapiṇḍika has pointed out, as a matter of fact, the fortunate one had indeed discoursed to Anāthapiṇḍika on the subject of insight development as the straight course to the attainment of the noble path. Anāthapiṇḍika reborn in the Tussita realm. After admonishing Anāthapiṇḍika, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Ananda departed. Not long after they had left, Anāthapiṇḍika passed away and was reborn in the Tussita realm. Then, around the middle watch of the night, the Deva Anāthapiṇḍika approached the Buddha, and made obeisance to him. Herein, the reason for Deva Anāthapiṇḍika's visit to the Buddha should be noted. Being reborn in the Tussita realm, Anāthapiṇḍika found out, was a great thing, full of sense pleasures. His body, 3 miles long, was shining like a mass of gold. His mansion, pleasure gardens, the wish-fulfilling tree where he could get anything by mere wishing, etc. were indeed alluring. He reviewed his past existence and saw that his devotion to the 3 treasures had been the cause of this resplendent fresh existence. He considered his new Deva life. It was full of ease and comfort which could easily drown him in sense pleasures and forget the good doctrine. I must now go to the human world and sing the praises of the Jetavana monastery, which was his past deed of merit, the Sangha, the Buddha, the Noble Path, and Venerable Sariputta. Only on returning from the human world will I start enjoying this freshly acquired life. 4 verses addressed to the Buddha. These verses are found in the discourse giving advice to Anāthapiṇḍika, Anthapikavda Sutta, MN 143. Venerable Sir, this Jetavana monastery is the resort by day and by night of the Sangha, comprising monastics who are arahats as well as those training themselves for awakening. It is the residence of the Fortunate One, the King of the Dhamma. That is why it is source of delight to me. The Jetavana monastery was a monastic complex comprising the Buddha's perfumed chamber, the square pinnacled monastery, a number of monastic dwellings with exquisite ornate designs with fruit trees, flowering trees and shrubbery and restful seats. It was a religious place of rare elegance, a visitor's delight. However, the real attraction of the Jetavana monastery lay in its residents, the taint-free noble ones, Arya, such as the Buddha and his noble disciples. And it was that spiritual beauty of the place rather than the sensual attraction that appealed to a noble one, Arya, like Anāthapiṇḍika. 1426. It is through action, volitions associated with the path, Magga, knowledge, including right view and right thinking, Dhamma, meaning right effort, right mindfulness and right concentration, and virtuous living based on morality, meaning right speech, right action and right livelihood, that beings are purified. They are not purified through lineage or wealth. In this verse, Anāthapiṇḍika extols the noble path of 8 constituents. That being so, the wise person, discerning his own welfare which culminates in Nibbana, should contemplate, with right perception, the impermanence, the suffering and the unsubstantiality of the 5 aggregates which are the objects of clinging. Contemplating this, that person is purified through realizing the 4 noble truths. The mind-body complex which one clings to as oneself, when brought to its ultimate analysis by means of insight development, reveals its true nature. As insight fully develops into path knowledge, the truth of the suffering, dukkha, of repeated existences, is seen through by the full understanding of phenomena. The truth of the origin of suffering is seen through and discarded. The truth of the cessation of suffering is realized by direct experience. The truth of the path is penetratingly understood by developing it. Then the yogi is free from the defilements and purity is achieved. In this verse, Anāthapiṇḍika extolled the development of insight and the realization of the path knowledge. A certain monastic reaches the other shore of Nibbana. In this respect, he is equal to Venerable Sariputta. But Venerable Sariputta, with his knowledge, panna, morality, sila, and calm, upasama, through the pacification of the pollutants, asava, is the noblest among those monastics who reach the other shore of Nibbana. In this verse, Anāthapiṇḍika extols the virtues of Venerable Sariputta. Deva Anāthapiṇḍika addressed these 4 verses to the Buddha. The Buddha listened to them without making any interruption, thus showing his approval. Then, Deva Anāthapiṇḍika thinking gladly, the teacher is pleased with these words of mine, made obeisance to the Buddha and vanished there and then. Then, when the night had passed and morning had come, the Buddha addressed the monastics thus, Monastics, last night, about the middle watch of the night, a certain Deva approached me, made obeisance to me, and stood in a suitable place. Then he addressed me with these verses. The Buddha recited to the monastics the verses spoken by Deva Anāthapiṇḍika. Here, the Buddha did not mention the name of Anāthapiṇḍika because he wanted the intuition of Venerable Ananda to be brought to the fore. Accordingly, as soon as the Buddha had spoken, Venerable Ananda, without hesitating a moment, said, Venerable Sir, that Deva must have been the Deva Anāthapiṇḍika. Venerable Sir, Anāthapiṇḍika the Householder had much devotion to Venerable Sariputta. Well said, Ananda, well said, Ananda, you have the right intuition. Ananda, that Deva was indeed Deva Anāthapiṇḍika, so said the Buddha. Citta the Householder. Aspiration in the past. The future Citta the Householder was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Āḷavaka, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, while listening to the Buddha's discourse, he saw a certain disciple being named by him as the foremost in expounding the doctrine. The worthy man aspired to that distinction. After making an extraordinary offering, he expressed his wish that, in some future existence, he would be designated by a Buddha as the foremost disciple in expounding the doctrine, and this was confirmed. The son of a hunter. The future Citta was reborn either in the Deva realm or the human realm for 100,000 eons. During the time of Buddha Kassapa, he was born as a son of a hunter. When he came of age, he took up the vocation of hunter. One rainy day, he went to the forest to hunt, carrying a spear. While searching for game, he saw a monastic with his head covered with his robe of dirt rags, sitting on a rock platform inside a natural cavern. He thought that must be a monastic meditating. He hurried home and had 2 pots cooked simultaneously, one in which rice was boiled and the other for meat. When the rice and the meat had been cooked, he saw 2 monastics come to his house for alms food. He invited them into his house, took their alms bowls, and requested them to accept his offering of alms food out of compassion for him. Having had the 2 monastics seated, he let his family take care of the offering of alms food to them while he hurried back to the forest to offer the alms food to the meditating monastic. He carried the rice and the meat in a pot properly covered with banana leaves. On the way, he gathered various kinds of flowers and wrapped them in some leaves. He went to the monastic in the cavern, filled his alms bowl with the alms food and offered it and the flowers to him reverentially. Then he sat in a suitable place and said to the monastic, "Just as this offering of delicious food and flowers makes me very glad, may I, in future existences in the course of Sasra, be blessed with all kinds of gifts. May flowers of 5 hues shower down on me." The monastic saw that the supporter was destined to gain sufficient merit leading to attaining of path and fruit and taught him in detail the method of contemplating the 32 aspects of the parts of the body. That son of the hunter, the future Citta, lived a life full of good deeds and at his death, he was reborn in the Deva realm. There, he was blessed with showers of flowers that rained down on him up to knee-deep. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Citta was reborn in fortunate destinations throughout the aeon that intervened between the appearance of the 2 Buddhas, and during the time of Buddha Gautama, he was reborn as the son of a rich man in the town of Machiksa, in the province of Magadha. At the time of his birth, flowers of 5 hues rained down over the whole town until they were knee-deep. His parents said, "Our son has brought his own name, for he has delighted the mind of the whole town by being blessed with the wondrous floral tribute of 5 colors. Let us call him Citta." When young Citta came of age, he was married, and at the death of his father, he succeeded to the office of a rich man of Machixa. At that time, Venerable Mahānāma, one of the group of 5 ascetics, came to Machixa. Citta was full of reverence for Venerable Mahānāma for his serenity. He took the alms bowl of Venerable Mahānāma, and invited him to his house for an offering of alms food. After Venerable Mahānāma had finished his meal, Citta took him to his orchard, had a monastery built for him and requested him to reside there as well as to accept daily alms food from his house. Venerable Mahānāma consented out of compassion, and seeing that the householder was destined to acquire sufficient merit leading to the attainment of the paths and fruitions, he taught a discourse to him extensively on the 6 internal sense spheres and the 6 external sense spheres, that is, on the sense objects. This subject was taught to Citta because he was a person of middling intelligence, Majjhima Puggala. As Citta had, in his past existences, cultivated insight into the impermanence, suffering and unsubstantiality of mind and matter which are conditioned phenomena, his present efforts in insight meditation led him to the stage of a non-returner, Anagami. It is not mentioned in the scriptures by which method of meditation he attained non-returning, Anagami Phala. However, considering his training, it might be assumed that he attained path knowledge by meditating on the sense spheres. Incidentally, the difference in the attainments between Citta and Anāthapiṇḍika should be noted here. Anāthapiṇḍika, supporter of the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, was a stream enterer who delighted in generosity, Dhanabharata, whereas Citta, supporter of the Āḷavaka monastery in Machixa, was a non-returner who delighted in generosity, Dhanabharata, as well as in Dhamma, Dhammabharata. Citta's delight in charity and in the Dhamma. A few instances of Citta's natural delight in generosity and in the Dhamma are mentioned here as recorded in the thematic discourses concerning Citta, Citta Sayutta, SN 41. The diversity of elements. The first discourse by Isiddhata, Pahama Isiddhata Sutta, SN 41.2. At one time, many monastics were living in the Āḷavaka monastery which was donated by Citta the Householder, in Machixa. One day, Citta went to the monastery and after paying respects to the elders, he invited them to an offering of food in his home the next day. Next day, when the elders were seated at the prepared seats, Citta made obeisance, sat in a suitable place, and said to the senior-most monastic present then, "Venerable Sir, diversity of elements, data nada, has been said. To what extent is there the diversity of elements as taught by the Fortunate One?" The elder knew the answer but he was diffident to give a reply to the question, and so he remained silent. For a third time too the elder kept his silence. Then Venerable Isiddhata, the junior-most monastic among the monastics present, thought, "The elder does not answer the question, nor ask another monastic to answer. The Sangha, by not answering Citta's question, makes him appear to be harassing them. I shall save the situation by answering his question." So, he went near the elder and said, "Venerable Sir, may I be allowed to answer the question by Citta?" And the elder gave him permission to do so. Then, Venerable Isiddhata returned to his seat and said to Citta, "Householder, you asked the question, diversity of elements, has been said, to what extent is there a diversity of elements?" "Yes, Venerable Sir, that is so," replied Citta. "Householder, as taught by the Fortunate One there are various elements, such as the eye element, Cakkhu Dhatu, the element of visual object, Rupa Dhatu, the eye consciousness element, Cakkhu Vaya Dhatu, the mind element, Mano Dhatu, the element of thought, Dhamma Dhatu, the mind consciousness element, Mano Vaya Dhatu. Householder, these are the various elements, Dhatananada, as taught by the Fortunate One." Citta was satisfied with the answer given by Venerable Isiddhata and personally attended to him at the food offering. When, after finishing the meal, the monastics returned to monastery, the elders said to Venerable Isiddhata, "Friend Isiddhata, you perceive the problem well. I have no such perception, therefore, friend Isiddhata, when similar questions are asked of us, you may do the answering. Personality View. The second discourse by Isiddhata, Dittiya Isiddhata Sutta, SN 41.3. On another occasion, when Citta the Householder was making an offering of food to the Sangha in his residence, before serving the food he put this question to the elder: is the world permanent or is it impermanent? The question is characteristic of wrong views, and implies the arising or otherwise of such a view. As in the previous case, the elder did not answer although he knew it. When he kept silence for 3 repeated questionings by Citta, Venerable Isiddhata obtained the elder's permission to answer and replied to him: when there is the erroneous concept regarding the present body or the 5 aggregates, personality view, Sakya Daihi, arises. When there is no erroneous concept regarding the 5 aggregates, personality view does not arise. Citta pursued the problem with questions as to how the erroneous concept regarding the present body of 5 aggregates arises, and how that concept does not arise. Venerable Isiddhata gave analytical answers to his satisfaction. After that, a conversation between Citta and Venerable Isiddhata took place as follows. Citta: from which place do you come, Venerable Sir? Isiddhata: I come from Avanti country. Citta: Venerable Sir, in Avanti country there is a friend of mine, whom I have never met, by the name of Isiddhata, who had become a monastic. Have you met him, Venerable Sir? Isiddhata: yes, I have, Householder. Citta: Venerable Sir, where is that monastic now? Venerable Isiddhata did not give a reply. Citta: Venerable Sir, are you my friend whom I had never seen? Isiddhata: yes, Householder. Citta: Venerable Sir, may Venerable Isiddhata be pleased to stay in Machiksa. The Āḷavaka monastery is pleasant to live in. I will see to all the 4 requisites: robes, alms, food, dwelling and medicines. Isiddhata: Householder, you speak well. Venerable Isiddhata said so merely to express his appreciation of the donation, but he did not say so with the intention of accepting the donation of any of the 4 requisites. Citta was delighted with the answer given by Venerable Isiddhata and personally attended on Venerable Isiddhata in making offerings of alms food. When the monastics returned to the monastery, the elder spoke to Venerable Isiddhata in the same words as he did previously on the occasion of the first discourse by Isiddhata. Then Venerable Isiddhata considered that after revealing his identity as an unseen friend of Citta before becoming a monastic, it would not be proper for him to stay in the monastery donated by Citta. So after tidying up his living quarters and the monastery, he took his alms bowl and double robe and left the monastery for good, never to return to the town of Machiksa. Venerable Mahāka. The Discourse on the Miracles of Mahāka, Mahāka Pariya Sutta, SN 41.4. At one time, many monastics were living in the Āḷavaka monastery, which was donated by Citta the Householder, in Machiksa. Then Citta went to the monastery and after paying respects to the Sangha, he invited them to his farmyard the next day, where his cows were kept. On the following day, the Sangha went to his farmyard and sat in the seats prepared for them. Then the householder personally offered milk rice to the Sangha. He was served the milk rice in a gold vessel by his servants at the same time the Sangha were being served. As he was accompanying the Sangha, after the meal, to the monastery, he gave orders to his servants to make offerings of the remaining milk rice to suitable people. Then he accompanied the Sangha to their monastery. It was scorching hot when the Sangha left the householder's farmyard. Walking in the hot sun, a rich meal was a rather inconvenient thing for the Sangha. Then Venerable Mahāka, the junior-most monastic, said to the senior-most monastic, Elder, would a cool breeze in an overcast sky with slight raindrops be convenient for everyone? And the elder replied, Friend Mahāka, a cool breeze in an overcast sky with slight raindrops would be convenient for everyone. Thereupon, Venerable Mahāka, by his powers, changed the weather, letting the cool breeze blow in an overcast sky with slight raindrops. Citta noted this event as a marvelous power possessed by the junior monastic. When they arrived at the monastery, Venerable Mahāka said to the elder, Elder, is that enough? And the elder replied, Friend Mahāka, that is enough. Friend Mahāka, that is something done well that deserves reverence. After this recognition of Venerable Mahāka's powers, all the monastics returned to their respective dwelling places within the monastery complex. Then Citta requested Venerable Mahāka to display his miraculous powers. Venerable Mahāka said, "In that case, householder, spread your cloak at the doorstep to my monastery. Put a pile of grass from the bundle of grass on the cloak." Citta did as was instructed by Venerable Mahāka. Then Venerable Mahāka entered the monastery, bolted the door from inside and sent out flames through the keyhole and through the edges of the door. The flames burned up the grass but the cloak remained unburnt. Then Citta picked up his cloak and, awestruck with goose flesh appearing on his skin, he sat in a suitable place. Thereafter, Venerable Mahāka came out of the monastery and said to Citta, "Householder, is that enough?" Citta replied, "Venerable Mahāka, that is enough." Venerable Mahāka, that is something accomplished. Venerable Mahāka, that deserves reverence. Venerable Sir, may Venerable Mahāka be pleased to stay in Machiksa. The Āḷavaka monastery is pleasant to live in. I will see to the 4 requisites of robes, alms, food, dwelling, medicines. Venerable Mahāka said, "Householder, you say what is good." However, Venerable Mahāka considered that it would not be proper for him to stay at the Āḷavaka monastery. So after tidying up his living quarters and the monastery, he took his alms bowl and upper robe and left the monastery for good. In the above 2 discourses, Citta the Householder had great reverence and admiration for Venerable Isidatta and Venerable Mahāka in donating his monastic complex to the 2 monastics. However, from the point of view of the monastics, the 4 requisites they were donated were flawed because they amounted to rewards for their actions, Isidatta for expounding the Dhamma, and Mahāka for displaying miraculous power. Hence, out of regard for the monastic rules of conduct, they left the place for good. We have chosen these 3 discourses, Sutta, the 2 about Venerable Isidatta and the 1 about Venerable Mahāka as examples of how Citta the Householder cherished the Dhamma. The reader is advised to go through the rest of the discourses in the thematic discourses concerning Citta, Citta Sayutta, SN 41. A brief story of Venerable Sudhamma. The following is mentioned in the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uggata Nikaya. For details refer to the commentary on the Dhamma verses, Dhammapada, DHP 7374. One day, the 2 chief disciples, accompanied by 1,000 monastic disciples, visited the Āḷavaka monastery. At that time, Venerable Sudhamma was the abbot of the monastery. Citta the Householder, supporter of the monastery, made magnificent preparations to honor the visiting Sangha without consulting Venerable Sudhamma. Venerable Sudhamma took exception to it and remarked, "There is one thing missing in this lavish array of offerings and that is sesame cake." This was an innuendo to belittle Citta, whose family, in the earlier generation, were sellers of sesame cakes. Citta made a suitably rude response in vulgar language to the sarcastic remark of the abbot, who was touched to the quick and took the matter to the Buddha. After listening to the Buddha's admonition, the abbot, Venerable Sudhamma, made amends to Citta. Then, staying at the Āḷavaka monastery, and practicing the Dhamma, Venerable Sudhamma gained insight and became an arahat. Citta's pilgrimage to the Buddha. The following account is also taken from the commentary on the Dhamma verses, Dhammapada, DHP 7374. When Venerable Sudhamma became an arahat, Citta the Householder reflected thus, "I have become a non-returner." But the stages of awakening from stream entry, Sotapaddi Phala, to non-returning, Anagami Phala, had been attained without even meeting the Buddha. It behoves me to go and meet him now. He had 500 carts fully laden with provisions, such as sesame, rice, ghee, molasses, honey, clothing, etc., for the long journey to Savatthi. He made a public invitation to the populace in Machiksa that anyone, male or female monastic, male or female lay disciple, might, if they wished, join him on a pilgrimage to the Buddha and that he would see to every need of the pilgrims. And, in response to his invitation, there were 500 monks, 500 nuns, 500 male lay disciples and 500 female lay disciples who joined him on the pilgrimage. The 2,000 pilgrims who joined Citta plus the 1,000 of his entourage, totaling 3,000, were well provided for the 30-league journey. However, at every league of his journey, on the way Devas welcomed them with temporary shelter and celestial food, such as gruel, edibles, cooked rice and beverages, and every one of the 3,000 pilgrims was attended on to his satisfaction. By traveling a league a day, meeting with the Deva's hospitality at every stop, the pilgrims reached Savatthi after a month. The provisions carried in his 500 carts were not used. They even had surfeit of provisions which were offered by the Devas and human beings along the way, and which they donated to other persons. On the day when the pilgrims were due to arrive in Savatthi, the Buddha said to Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, this evening Citta the Householder, accompanied by 500 lay disciples, will be paying homage to me." Ananda asked, "Venerable Sir, will miracles happen then?" "Yes, Ananda, there will be miracles." "In what manner will they happen, Venerable Sir?" "Ananda, when he comes to me, there will rain a thick floral tribute of 5 hues that will rise knee-deep over an area of 14 acres. This dialogue between the Buddha and Venerable Ananda aroused the curiosity of the citizens of Savatthi. People passed on the exciting news of Citta's arrival, saying, "A person of great past merit by the name of Citta the Householder is coming to town. Miracles are going to happen. He is arriving today. We will not miss the opportunity of seeing such a great person." With presents ready, they awaited on both sides of the road for the visitor and his friends. When the pilgrim party arrived near the Jetavana monastery, the 1,000 monastics of the party went first. Citta told the 500 female lay disciples to stay behind, and follow later, and he went to the Buddha accompanied by 500 male lay disciples. It should be noted that the disciples paying homage to the Buddha were not an unruly crowd but well disciplined. Whether sitting or standing, they left a passageway for the Buddha to go to his raised platform, and they would remain motionless and silent on either side of the aisle. Citta then approached the aisle between the huge gathering of devotees. Whichever direction the noble disciple, who had been established in the fruition of the 3 lower paths glanced, the people murmured, "That is Citta the Householder." He became a thrilling object in that big gathering. Citta drew close to the Buddha and he was enveloped by the 6 Buddha radiances. He stroked the Buddha's ankles with great reverence and vigor, and then the floral tribute of 5 colors, described earlier, rained down. People cheered enthusiastically loud and long. Citta spent 1 whole month in close attendance on the Buddha. During that time, he made a special request to the Buddha and the Sangha not to go out for alms food but to accept his offerings at the monastery. All the pilgrims that had accompanied him also were taken care of in every aspect. In his month-long stay at the Jetavana monastery, none of his original provisions were used, for Devas and humans made all sorts of gifts to Citta. At the end of 1 month, Citta made obeisance to the Buddha and said, "Venerable Sir, I came with the intention of making offerings of my own property to the Fortunate One. I spent 1 month on the way and another month here in the Jetavana monastery. Still I have had no opportunity to offer my own property, for I have been blessed with all sorts of gifts from Devas and humans. It would seem that even if I were to stay here a year, I still may not have the chance to make offerings of my own property. It is my wish to deposit all the property I have brought here in this monastery for the benefit of the Sangha. May the Fortunate One be pleased to show me the place to do so." The Buddha asked Venerable Ananda to find a suitable place for Citta to leave the 500 cart loads of provisions, which were then offered to the Sangha. Then Citta returned to Machiksa with the 500 empty carts. People and Devas, seeing the empty carts, remarked in mild rebuke, "Citta, have you done such deeds in the past as would lead to your going about with empty carts?" Then they loaded his empty carts to the full with the 7 kinds of treasures. Citta also received sufficient gifts of all kinds, with which he catered to the needs of the pilgrims till he reached Machiksa in ease and comfort. Venerable Ananda paid respects to the Buddha and said, "Venerable Sir, Citta the Householder took 1 month coming to Savatthi, and spent another month at the Jetavana monastery. During this period, he had made great offerings with gifts received from Devas and humans. He had emptied his 500 carts of all provisions which he had brought, and was returning home with empty carts. However, People and devas who saw the empty carts said in mild rebuke, Citta, have you done such deeds in the past as would lead to your going about with empty carts? And they are said to have filled Citta's 500 carts with the 7 kinds of treasures. And Citta is said to have returned home comfortably, looking after the needs of his companions with gifts received from devas and humans. Venerable Sir, may I be allowed to ask a question? Does Citta meet with such abundance of honor and tribute only because he was on a pilgrimage to the Buddha? Would he meet the same kind of honor and tribute if he were to go elsewhere? The Buddha said to Venerable Ananda, Ananda, Citta the Householder will receive the same kind of honor and tributes whether he comes to me or goes elsewhere. This is indeed so, Ananda, because Citta the Householder is one who has firm conviction about productive deeds, karma, and their consequences, both in the mundane aspect and the supramundane aspect. Further, he is fully convinced about the supramundane benefits that the 3 treasures are capable of. For a person of such a nature, honor and tribute lines his path wherever he goes. The Buddha further uttered this verse, which is translated in prose, DHP 303. Ananda, the noble disciple who is endowed with conviction regarding the mundane and the supramundane aspects of one's own actions and morality, and is possessed of following and wealth, is held in reverence by men and devas wherever he goes. By the end of the discourse many hearers attained path knowledge, such as stream entry, etc. Foremost title achieved. From that time onwards, Citta the Householder went about accompanied by 500 noble lay disciples. On one occasion, when the Buddha was naming distinguished lay disciples according to their merit, he declared, with reference to the discourses made by Citta as recorded in the thematic discourses concerning Citta, Citta Sayutta, SN 41. Itad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsiknat hama kathikna yadida Citta gahapati makikseko. Monastics, among my lay disciples who are exponents of the Dhamma, Citta the Householder, of Machiksa is the foremost. The proficiency of Citta in expounding the Dhamma may be gleaned from the discourse about the fetters, Sayajana Sutta, SN 41.1, and the first discourse concerning Kamabu, Pahama Kamabu Sutta, SN 41.5. Seeing the sick. The following is based on the discourse about seeing the sick, Gilana Dasana Sutta, SN 41.10, and its commentary. As a non-returner, Anagami, who was the foremost expounder of the Dhamma among lay disciples, Citta the Householder gave a discourse even on his deathbed. When Citta was terminally ill, many devas who were guardians of his premises, guardians of the forest, guardians of certain trees and guardians who had power over herbs and trees, being of huge proportions, assembled before him and said to him, Householder, now make a wish saying, may I be reborn as a universal monarch when I die. Citta replied to them, being a universal monarch is impermanent in nature, unstable in nature. It is something that one must leave behind at last. His relatives and friends by his bedside thought he was uttering those strange words in a fit of delirium and said to him, Lord, be careful, do not talk absent-mindedly. Citta asked them, you say, Lord, be careful, do not talk absent-mindedly. With respect to what words of mine do you say so? And the relatives and friends said, Lord, you were saying, being a universal monarch is impermanent in nature, unstable in nature. It is something that one must leave behind at last. Citta then said to them, men, devas who are guardians of my premises, guardians of the forest, guardians of trees, guardians who have power over herbs and trees, came and said to me, Householder, now make a wish saying, may I be reborn as the universal monarch when I die. So I told them, being a universal monarch is impermanent in nature, unstable in nature. It is something one must leave behind at last. I was not saying these words absent-mindedly. Thereupon Citta's friend and relatives asked him, Lord, what advantages did these devas see in advising you to wish for rebirth as universal monarch? Citta replied, men, these devas thought, this householder Citta has morality, has clean conduct. If he would wish for it he could easily have his wish fulfilled. One who is righteous can see benefits accruing to the righteous. This was the advantage they saw in advising me to wish for rebirth as a universal monarch. Thus, I replied to them, being a universal monarch is impermanent in nature, unstable in nature. It is something one must leave behind at last. I was not saying these words absent-mindedly. The friends and relatives of Citta then asked him again, in that case, Lord, give us some admonition. And Citta gave his last discourse thus, in that case, friend and relatives, you should practice with the resolve, we will have perfect confidence in the Buddha, reflecting that 1. The Buddha is worthy of homage by the greatest of humans, devas and brahmas. 2. The Buddha knows all things fundamentally and truly by his own perfect wisdom. 3. The Buddha is endowed with supreme knowledge and good conduct. 4. The Buddha speaks only what is beneficial and true. 5. The Buddha knows the three worlds. 6. The Buddha is incomparable in taming those who deserve to be tamed. 7. The Buddha is the teacher of devas and humans. 8. The Buddha makes known the Four Noble Truths. 9. The Buddha is endowed with the 6 great qualities of glory. We will have perfect confidence in the Dhamma, reflecting that 1. The Dhamma of the Fortunate One is well expounded. 2. Its truths are evident. 3. It is not delayed in its results. 4. It can stand investigation. 5. It is worthy of being perpetually borne in mind. 6. Its truths can be realized by the noble ones individually by their own effort and practice. We will have perfect confidence in the Sangha, reflecting that 1. The 8 categories of noble disciples of the Fortunate One, the Sangha, are endowed with noble practice. 2. They are endowed with straightforward uprightness. 3. They are endowed with right conduct. 4. They are endowed with correctness in practice deserving reverence. Being thus endowed with these 4 attributes. 5. The 8 categories of noble disciples of the Fortunate One consisting of 4 pairs are worthy of receiving offerings brought even from afar. 6. They are worthy of receiving offerings specially set aside for guests. 7. They are worthy of receiving offerings made for the sake of acquiring great merit for the hereafter. 8. They are worthy of receiving respect. 9. They are an incomparably fertile field for all to sow the seed of merit. And also you should practice with the resolve, we shall always lay everything we have at the disposal of recipients who have morality and who conduct themselves well. Citta the Householder then made his friends and relatives established in paying reverence to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha and in generosity. With these last words he expired. The scriptures do not specifically say in which realm Citta the Householder was reborn, but since he was a non-returner, anagami, he was presumed to be reborn in one of the 15 Brahma realms of the form realm outside of the formless realm, most probably in the pure abodes, Sattavesa. (4) Hatthaka Āḷavaka, the kind prince. Aspiration in the past. The future Hatthaka Āḷavaka was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, when he was listening to the Buddha's discourse, he saw a lay disciple being named the foremost among those lay disciples who were accomplished in the practice of the 4 ways of kind treatment to others, through generosity, kindly speech, beneficial conduct and impartiality, Sagaha Vathu, c. and 4.256. He admired that man, and, making an extraordinary offering, he aspired to that distinction. The Buddha predicted that his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Hatthaka Āḷavaka was reborn in the good destinations for the entire 100,000 eons. During the time of Buddha Gautama he was reborn as Prince Āḷavaka, son of King Āḷavaka, in the city of Av, and it was decided to give the young prince to the Yaka Āḷavaka as a sacrifice. Before this could happen, however, the Buddha converted the Yaka. See chapter 33c for details. The story of the young prince, which is reproduced from the same chapter, continues. When the king's men from the city of Av heard the tumultuous acclaim, they thought to themselves, such a roar could not have occurred about any personage other than the Fortunate One. Could it be that the Fortunate One has come? On seeing the bodily radiance of the Buddha, they no longer remained outside the mansion but entered it without fear. There, in the Yaka's mansion, did they encounter the Buddha seated and the converted Āḷavaka standing with his hands joined in adoration. After seeing thus, the king's men bravely handed the little Prince Āḷavaka over to the Āḷavaka, saying, "Great Yaka, we have brought this Prince Āḷavaka to give you in sacrifice. You may eat him if you wish. Do as you please." As Āḷavaka had already become a noble stream enterer, Sotapanna, at that time and especially as he was told so in front of the Buddha, he felt greatly ashamed. Then Āḷavaka tenderly took over the little prince with his 2 hands and offered him to the Buddha, saying, "Exalted Buddha, I offer this royal child to you. I give you the boy in generosity. Buddhas are kind and protective to sentient beings for their welfare. Exalted Buddha, please receive him, this Prince Āḷavaka, for his welfare and happiness." He also uttered this verse, SNPA, PTS 1.240. Ima kumra sata punalakha, sabagyupada paripua bayajana, Udaga sito samano datami te, Paigaha loka hitaya kakama. Exalted Buddha of the fivefold eye. Being elated and happy I, Āḷavaka by name, faithfully give you the prince named Āḷavaka, who possesses more than 100 marks owing to his past meritorious deeds, who also has all the big and small limbs and a developed physical appearance. Buddhas look after the sentient beings for their benefit. Kindly accept the prince for his own welfare. The Buddha accepted the little Prince Āḷavaka with his hands. While he was thus accepting, in order to give his blessing for the benefit of long life and good health of the Yaka and the prince, the Buddha uttered 3 verses, each omitting a line to be filled up by somebody else. That blank in each verse was filled up 3 times as the 4th line by the Yaka in order to establish the little prince in the 3 refuges. The incomplete verses, 785, which were uttered by the Buddha and completed by the Yaka are as follows. Buddha. Digheko hotu iya kumaro, tuvan ca yaka sukido bhavahi, abhyadita loka hitaya tihatha. May this Prince Āḷavaka live long. Yaka Āḷavaka, may you also have physical and mental happiness. May you both remain long, being free from the 96 diseases, for the welfare of many. Yaka. Iya kumaro Sūramañtha Buddha. Exalted Buddha. This Prince Āḷavaka takes refuge in the Fortunate One, Lord of the world, and omniscient Buddha. Buddha. Digheko hotu iya kumaro, tuvan ca yaka sukido bhavahi, abhyadita loka hitaya tihatha. May this Prince Āḷavaka live long. Yaka Āḷavaka, may you also have physical and mental happiness. May you both remain long, being free from the 96 diseases, for the welfare of many. Yaka. Iya kumaro Sūramañtha Dhamma. Exalted Buddha. This Prince Āḷavaka takes refuge in the Dhamma consisting of the 10 features, such as the 4 paths, 4 fruitions, nibbana and the entire body of teaching. Buddha. Digheko hotu iya kumaro, tuvan ca yaka sukido bhavahi, abhyadita loka hitaya tihatha. May this Prince Āḷavaka live long. Yaka Āḷavaka, may you also have physical and mental happiness. May you both remain long, being free from the 96 diseases, for the welfare of many. Yaka. Iya kumaro Sūramañtha Saga. Exalted Buddha. This Prince Āḷavaka takes refuge in the saga of the noble ones in the ultimate and noble sense of the word, Paramatha Arya. Then the Buddha entrusted the little prince to the king's officers, ordering, "Bring up this royal child and later return him to me." The original name of the prince was Āḷavaka. As has been said, the day the Yaka was tamed, the prince was passed from the hands of the royal officers to the Yaka's hands, from the Yaka's hands to the Buddha's hands, from the Buddha's hands back to the hands of the officers. Hence he was named Hatthaka Āḷavaka, Āḷavaka who has been handed over from person to person. When the officers returned, carrying the little prince, they were seen by farmers and foresters and other people, who asked timidly, "How is it? Is it that the Yaka does not want to devour the prince because he is too small?" "Friends, do not be afraid," replied the officers, "the Fortunate One has made him free from danger," and they related the whole story to them. Then the entire city of cheered, shouting, "Well done! Well done! The people faced in the direction where the Āḷavaka was and roared, "The fortunate one has caused safety. The fortunate one has caused safety." When it was time for the Buddha to go to town for alms food, the Yaka went along, carrying the Buddha's bowl and robe half the way down to see the Buddha off, and then he returned to his mansion. 786. After the Buddha went on alms round in the city of Av, and when he had finished his meal, he sat on the splendid seat which was prepared under a tree in quietude at the city gate. Then King Āḷavaka came with his hosts of ministers, troops, and they were joined by the citizens of Av who did obeisance to the Buddha and sat down around him and asked, "Exalted Buddha, how could you tame such a wild and cruel Yaka?" The Buddha then delivered the discourse to Āḷavaka, Āḷavaka Sutta, SNP 1.10, in 12 verses, in which he started his narration with the attack made by the Yaka and related in detail, "In this manner did he rain down 9 kinds of weapons, in this manner did he exhibit such horrible things, in this manner did he put questions to me, in this manner did I answer his questions." By the end of the discourse 84,000 sentient beings realized the 4 truths and found emancipation. Now King Āḷavaka and the citizens of Av built a shrine for the Yaka Āḷavaka, near the original shrine of the Deva Vesava. And they regularly made offerings to the Yaka of things worthy of divine beings, Devata Bali, such as flowers, perfumes, etc. When the little prince grew up into an intelligent youth, they sent him to the Buddha with these words, "You, Prince, have secured a new lease of life because of the fortunate one. Go and serve the master. Serve the Sangha of monks as well." The prince approached the Buddha and the monks and rendered his service to them, practiced the Dhamma, and was established in the non-returning fruition, Anagami Phala. He also learned all the teachings of the 3 baskets, Tipiyaka, and acquired a retinue of 500 lay devotees for the Buddha. Foremost title achieved. One day, Hatthaka Āḷavaka, who kept the observance day precepts, accompanied by 500 lay disciples, visited the Buddha. After paying respects to him, he sat in a suitable place. When the Buddha saw his big following, and very sedate manners of those that came with Hatthaka Āḷavaka, he said, "Āḷavaka, you have a big following, what sort of kind treatment do you extend to them?" And Hatthaka Āḷavaka replied, "Venerable Sir, I practice generosity towards those persons who would be delighted by my act of generosity, I use pleasant words to those who would be delighted by pleasant words, I give necessary assistance to those who are in need of such assistance and who would be delighted by my assistance, I treat those as my equals in respect of those who would be delighted by such treatment." With reference to that conversation between the Buddha and Hatthaka Āḷavaka, on one occasion, during the Buddha's residence at the Jetavana monastery when he was conferring titles to outstanding lay disciples, he declared, "Etad aga bhikkave mama svakna upsignakathi sagaha vadahi parisa sagahantna yadida hatthako avako." Monastics, among my lay disciples who treat their followers kindly in 4 ways, Hatthaka Āḷavaka is the foremost. (5) Mahānāma, the Sakyan prince. Aspiration in the past. The future Mahānāma was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. One day, while he was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a lay disciple being named as the foremost lay disciple in offerings of the most delicious and palatable alms food, medicines and medicinal articles. He had a strong wish to become such a distinguished lay disciple in future. After making an extraordinary offering, he made known his aspiration to the Buddha, who then predicted that his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. One day, the Buddha, after staying in Varanja for the rains retreat, Vasa, period, made a journey to Nakulapitu, traveling in stages. Upon arrival, he took up his abode at the Nirodharama monastery in Nakulapitu, together with many monastics. When Mahānāma, the Sakyan prince, the elder brother of Venerable Anuruddha, learned of the arrival of the Buddha, he visited him, made his obeisance, and sat in a suitable place. Then he said to the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, I have been told that the Sangha have had a hard time in gathering alms food in Varanja. May I be allowed the privilege of offering daily alms food to the Sangha for a period of 4 months, so that I may provide the 1436, necessary nourishment to compensate for the deficiency of nourishment during the last 3 months or more. The Buddha signified his assent by remaining silent. Prince Mahānāma, understanding that the Buddha had accepted his invitation, made offerings of 5 kinds of very delicious foodstuffs and the 4 sweets, kata madu, which have medicinal effects to the Buddha and his Sangha from the following day onwards. At the end of the 4 months, he obtained the Buddha's consent to make the same kind of offerings for another 4 months, at the end of which he obtained permission to continue with his offerings for a further 4 months, thus totaling 12 months in all. At the end of 1 year, he sought further approval but the Buddha refused. At the end of the year, Prince Mahānāma sought and obtained the approval of the Buddha to let him have the privilege of offering medicinal requisites to the Sangha for life. Yet later, due to circumstances that led to a Vinaya provision in the matter, the Buddha did not extend the period beyond 1 year. After the Buddha had agreed to let Mahānāma provide medicinal requisites to the Sangha for life, the group of 6 monastics bullied Prince Mahānāma and caused much annoyance. When the Buddha heard this, he rescinded the earlier privilege allowed to the prince and laid down the rule known as an invitation for 4 months, Katu Masapakaya Pavra, Vinpak 47, PTS 4.101, that no monastic may, without further invitation and a standing invitation, accept medicinal requisites from a supporter. Breach of the rule entails a confession, pasatya, offense. Foremost title achieved. It became the routine practice of Prince Mahānāma to offer the 5 kinds of very delicious foodstuffs and the 4 sweets which have medicinal effects to every monastic who came to his door. This elaborate style of providing alms food and 6. Ugga the Householder. Aspiration in the past. The future Ugga was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Āḷavaka, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, while he was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a disciple being named as the foremost among those who made gifts that delighted the receivers. He aspired to that distinction, and after making extraordinary offerings, he expressed his wish before the Buddha. The Buddha predicted that his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. After being reborn in the Deva realm or the human world for 100,000 eons, the future Ugga was reborn into a rich man's family in the city of Vesali, during Buddha Gautama's time. The future Ugga was not given any name during his childhood. When he came of age, he possessed a majestic physique like an ornamental doorpost, or a golden apparel hung for display. His exquisite masculine body and personal attributes became the talk of the town, as such people came to refer to him as Ugga the Householder, the mighty householder. It is noteworthy that Ugga gained stream entry knowledge on his very first meeting with the Buddha. Later, he came to be established in the 3 lower paths and 3 lower fruits, and became a non-returner, anagami. When Ugga grew old, he resorted to seclusion, and this thought occurred to him: I shall offer to the Fortunate One only those things that I cherish. I have learnt directly from the Fortunate One, he who makes a gift of what he cherishes, reaps the benefit that he cherishes. Then his thought extended to the wish, that the Fortunate One knew my thought and appeared at my door. The Buddha knew the thought of Ugga and at that very moment appeared miraculously at his door, in the company of many monastics. Ugga, on learning of the Buddha's arrival, went to welcome him, paid respects to him with the hands, knees and forehead touching the ground, took the alms bowl from his hands and invited him to the prepared seat in his house. At the same time, he offered seats to the accompanying monastics. He served the Buddha and the Sangha with various kinds of delicious food, and after the meal was finished, he sat in a suitable place and addressed the Buddha thus. 1. Venerable Sir, I have learnt directly from the Fortunate One that, he who makes a gift of what he cherishes, reaps the benefit that he cherishes. Venerable Sir, my cake made to resemble the sala flower is delightful. May the Fortunate One, out of compassion, accept this food. And the Buddha, out of compassion for the supporter, accepted it. Further Ugga said, Venerable Sir, I have learnt directly from the Fortunate One that, he who makes a gift of what he cherishes reaps the benefit that he cherishes. Venerable Sir. 2. My specially prepared dish of pork with jujube is delightful. 3. My vegetable dish of water convolvulus cooked in oil and water and done in oil gravy is delightful. 4. My special rice, carefully discarded of black grains. 5. My fine cloth made in Kasi province is delightful. 6. Venerable Sir, my dais, my big carpet of long fleece, woolen coverlets with quaint designs, rugs made of black panther's hide, couches with red canopies and with red bolsters at either end are delightful. Venerable Sir, I understand that these luxurious things are not proper for use by the fortunate one. Venerable Sir, this seat made of the core of sandalwood is worth over 100,000 pieces of money. May the fortunate one, out of compassion, accept these pieces of furniture. The Buddha out of compassion for the supporter accepted them. Note here that Ugga the householder is offering the items of furniture after serving the gruel but before serving the main meal. His offerings are made not only to the Buddha but also to the Sangha. Under item 6, above, Ugga said, I understand that these luxurious things are not proper for use by the fortunate one. There are also things that are not proper for use by the Buddha. He has caused them to be heaped together in assigned items, which are improper for use by the Buddha, to his storeroom, and donates only items which are proper. The sandalwood, being very dear and rare, is valued highly. After the Buddha had accepted it, he had it cut up into small bits and distributed to the monastics for use as a powder in preparing eye lotion. Then the Buddha spoke the following verses in appreciation of the donations, and 5.44. Ugga, one who gives in generosity with a delightful heart reaps the benefit of that deed in various delightful ways. One gives away clothing, dwelling place, food and various other things, strongly desirous of merit, to those noble ones who are straight in thought, word, and deed, who are arahats. That virtuous one who distinctly knows the arahats as the fertile field for sowing seeds of merit and gives up delightful things that are hard to be given up, abandons them, releases them liberally with a delightful heart, reaps the benefit of that deed in various delightful ways. After uttering these verses in appreciation of the householder's memorable offerings, the Buddha departed. On that occasion, Ugga the householder said to the Buddha, Venerable Sir, I have heard from the fortunate one's teaching that, he who makes a gift of what he cherishes, reaps the benefit that he cherishes. Venerable Sir, whatever suitable articles are in my possession may be assumed by the fortunate one as already donated to the fortunate one and his Sangha. Thenceforth, he always donated various suitable things to the Buddha and his Sangha. Foremost title achieved. On account of this, when the Buddha, during his residence at the Jetavana monastery, was designating outstanding lay disciples according to their merit, he declared, Itad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsaknamanpa dayakna yedida agogahapati vesaliko. Monastics, among my lay disciples who are in the habit of giving delightful things in generosity, Ugga the householder of Vesali, is the foremost. Householders Ugga of Vesali has 8 marvelous qualities. A brief description of these qualities is given here. For a full account the reader is directed to the first discourse about Ugga, Pahama Ugga Sutta, and 8.21. The 8 marvelous qualities of Ugga of Vesali. At one time, while staying at the Krasla monastery in the Great Wood, near Vesali, the Buddha said to the monastics, Monastics, note that Ugga the householder of Vesali, has 8 marvelous qualities. He then retired to his private chamber. Later, a monastic went to the house of Ugga and sat at a place prepared for the Sangha. Ugga greeted him, paid respects to the monastic, and sat in a suitable place. To Ugga, the monastic said, Householder, the fortunate one said that you are endowed with 8 marvelous qualities. What are these 8 qualities? Ugga replied, Venerable Sir, I am not sure which 8 qualities the fortunate one sees in me that he calls marvelous, but as a matter of fact, I have 8 qualities that are most extraordinary. May your reverence listen to them and consider well. Very well, householder, the monastic said, and Ugga told his story. 1. Venerable Sir, from the moment I cast my eyes on the Buddha, I had explicit faith in him as the Buddha, with no vacillation. So, Venerable Sir, my confidence in the Buddha at first sight is the first extraordinary thing about me. 2. Venerable Sir, I approached the Buddha with pure conviction. The Fortunate One discoursed to me in a step-by-step exposition on the merits of giving with generosity, the virtue of morality, the description about the celestial world, the world of the devas, and the practice of the noble path leading to the paths, fruitions, magga phala, and nibbana. That made my mind receptive, malleable, free of hindrances, elated and clear. The Fortunate One, knowing this, expounded to me regarding the exalted Dhamma, the Four Noble Truths of suffering, dukkha, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Consequently, I gained the eye of the Dhamma and attained non-returning, anagami phala. From the time I became a non-returner, anagami, I took a lifelong vow of the supramundane refuge and observed the 5 precepts with a pure life of chastity, brahmacharya, as one of the routine precepts. This is the second extraordinary thing about me. 3. Venerable Sir, I had 4 teenage wives. When I returned home on the day I became a non-returner, anagami, I called the 4 wives and said to them, Dear sisters, I have taken a vow of chastity for life. You may continue staying in my house, enjoying my wealth and practicing generosity, or you may return to your parents' house, taking sufficient riches with you for a comfortable life. Or, if any one of you wishes to remarry, just tell me who is going to be your new bridegroom. Each of you are free to exercise these options. Thereupon, my first wife expressed her wish to remarry and she named the bridegroom. I then let that man come to me, and holding my first wife in my left hand, and the libation jug in my right hand, I offered my wife to that man and sanctified their marriage. In relinquishing my first wife, who was still very young, to another man, I felt nothing in my mind. Venerable Sir, my detachment in giving up my first wife to another man is the third extraordinary thing about me. 4. Venerable Sir, whatever possessions I have in my house, I deem them to be assigned to the virtuous ones with morality. I hold back nothing from the Sangha. It is as though they are already in the possession of the Sangha as a body. Venerable Sir, this liberality towards the Sangha, in considering all my possessions as being assigned to the virtuous monastics, is the fourth extraordinary thing about me. 5. Venerable Sir, whenever I attend to a monastic, I do so reverently and personally, but never irreverently, Venerable Sir. Reverentially attending to monastics is the fifth extraordinary thing about me. 6. Venerable Sir, if that monastic teaches me a discourse, I listen reverentially, but never irreverently. If that monastic does not teach me a discourse, I will teach a discourse to him. Venerable Sir, my listening reverentially to a discourse by a monastic, and my teaching a discourse to the monastic who does not teach me, is the sixth extraordinary thing about myself. 7. Venerable Sir, devas often come to me, saying, Householder, the Fortunate One expounds the Dhamma which is excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent in the end. I would say to those devas, O devas, whether you say so or not, the Fortunate One expounds the Dhamma which is indeed excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent in the end. I do not think the devas coming to me to say those words is extraordinary. I do not feel exhilarated by their coming to me and for the experience of conversing with them. Venerable Sir, my indifference to the coming of devas to me and the experience of conversing with them is the seventh extraordinary thing about me. 8. Venerable Sir, I do not see any of the 5 fetters that tend to rebirth in the lower sensuous realms of existence that have not been discarded in me. Venerable Sir, my having attained non-returning, anagami magga, is the 8th extraordinary thing about me. Venerable Sir, I know I have these 8 extraordinary qualities. But I am not sure which 8 qualities the Fortunate One sees in me that he calls marvelous. Thereafter, the monastic, having received alms food from Ugga the Householder, departed. He took his meal and then went to the Buddha, made obeisance to him, and sat in a suitable place. Sitting thus, he related to the Buddha the full details of the conversation that took place between him and Ugga the Householder. The Buddha said, Good, monastic. Anyone who could answer your questions well should be given these very answers that Ugga the Householder did. Monastic, I say that Ugga the Householder is endowed with those 8 extraordinary qualities that are marvelous. Monastics, note that Ugga the Householder has these very 8 marvelous qualities that he told you. The destination of Ugga the Householder. Thereafter, on a certain day, Ugga the Householder of Vesali died and was reborn in one of the 5 pure abodes, Suddhavesa, in the Brahma realms. The Buddha was then residing at the Jetavana monastery. At that time, about the middle of the night, Brahma Ugga, with his resplendent body that flooded the whole of the Jetavana monastic complex, approached the Buddha, made his obeisance to him, and stood at a suitable distance. To that Brahma Ugga, the Buddha said, "How is it? Is your desire fulfilled?" And Brahma Ugga replied, "Venerable Sir, my desire is indeed fulfilled." Herein, it might be asked, what did the Buddha mean by desire? And what does the Brahma's reply mean? The answer is, the Buddha means becoming an arahat, and the Brahma's answer also means becoming an arahat. For the main desire of Ugga was becoming an arahat. Then the Buddha addressed Brahma Ugga in these 2 verses, and 5.44. He who gives away a delightful thing begets a delightful thing. He who gives away the best begets the best. He who gives away what is desirable begets what is desirable. He who gives away what is praiseworthy begets what is praiseworthy. He who is in the habit of giving away the best things, things that are desirable, things that are praiseworthy, is reborn as one who lives long and who has a big following. (7) Uggata the Householder. Aspiration in the past. The future Uggata was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. On one occasion, he was listening to a discourse by the Buddha when he saw a lay disciple being named as the foremost in attending on the Sangha without discrimination. He admired that man. As such, he made an extraordinary offering to the Buddha and his Sangha, and after that, he aspired to the same distinction in front of the Buddha, who predicted that his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Uggata was reborn in fortunate destinations for 100,000 eons before being reborn into a rich man's family in Hatthaka, in the country of the Vajis, during the time of Buddha Gautama. He was named Uggata, and when he came of age, he inherited his father's estate. At the time when the Buddha, after a tour of the country in the company of many monastics, arrived at Hatthaka and was sojourning in the Naga Park, Uggata was then indulging himself in a drinking spree, in the company of dancing girls, for 7 days at the Naga Park too. When he saw the Buddha, he was overwhelmed with shame, and when he went before the Buddha, he became sober suddenly. He made obeisance to the Buddha and sat in a suitable place. Then the Buddha taught him a discourse, at the end of which, he was established in the 3 lower paths and fruitions, and became a non-returner, anagami. From that moment on, he released the dancing girls from his service and devoted himself to generosity. Devas would come to him at the middle watch of the night and report to him as to the conduct of various monastics. They would say, "Householder, such and such a monastic is endowed with the 3 knowledges, such and such a monastic is endowed with the 6 kinds of super knowledges, such and such a monastic has morality, such and such a monastic has no morality," etc. Uggata disregarded the failings of the monastics who lacked in morality, as his devotion to the Sangha remained steadfast on account of the monastics of good morality. In making gifts, therefore, he never discriminated between the good and the bad monastic, his devotion being directed to the Sangha as a whole. When he went before the Buddha, he never mentioned about the bad monastics but always extolled the virtues of the good. Foremost title achieved. Therefore, on one occasion, during his residence at the Jetavana monastery, when prominent lay disciples were mentioned for their respective merits, the Buddha declared, "Itad aga bhikkave mama svakna upsikna sagupikna yet ida hathagamako agato gahapati." Monastics, among my lay disciples who devotedly attend on the Sangha without discrimination, Uggata the Householder of Hatthaka is the foremost. Householders Uggata of Hatthaka has 8 marvelous qualities. The 8 marvelous qualities of Uggata of Hatthaka. At one time, when the Buddha was sojourning at Hatthaka, in the country of the Vajjayans, he said to the monastics, "Monastics, note that Uggata the Householder of Hatthaka has 8 marvelous qualities." After saying this brief statement, the Buddha went into the monastery. Later, a monastic went to the house of Uggata and sat at a place prepared for the Sangha. Uggata greeted him, paid respects to the monastic, and sat in a suitable place. To Uggata, the monastic said, "Householder, the fortunate one said that you are endowed with 8 marvelous qualities. What are these 8 qualities?" Uggata replied, "Venerable sir, I am not sure which 8 qualities the fortunate one sees in me that he calls marvelous, but as a matter of fact, I have 8 qualities that are most extraordinary. May your reverence listen to them and consider well." "Very well, householder," the monastic said, and Uggata told his story. 1. Venerable sir, while I was indulging myself in sensuous pleasures in my own Naga park, I saw the Buddha from a distance. As soon as I cast my eyes on the Buddha, I had explicit faith in him as the Buddha, and was deeply devoted to him. I became suddenly sober after my drunken bout. Venerable sir, my explicit faith in and devotion to the Buddha at first sight and my recovering sobriety at that moment is the first extraordinary thing about me. 2. Venerable sir, I approached the Buddha with a pure conviction. The fortunate one discoursed to me in a most appropriate step-by-step exposition on 1. The merits of giving in generosity, 2. The virtue of morality, 3. The description about the world of devas, 4. The practice of the noble path. That made my mind receptive, malleable, free of hindrances, elated and clear. The fortunate one, knowing this, expounded to me the exalted Dhamma, the 4 noble truths of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Consequently, I gained the eye of the Dhamma, and attained non-returning, anagami phala. From the time I became a non-returner, anagami, I took a lifelong vow of the supramundane refuge, together with the observance of the 5 precepts with abstinence, brahmacharya, as one of them. Venerable sir, my attainment of non-returning, anagami phala, after my first meeting with the Buddha and my subsequent taking up of the supramundane refuge of the 5 precepts with the vow of abstinence, is the second extraordinary thing about me. 3. Venerable sir, I had 4 teenage wives. When I returned home on the day I became a non-returner, anagami, I called up my 4 wives and said to them, "Dear sisters, I have taken the vow of chastity for life. You may continue staying in my house, enjoying my wealth and practicing generosity, or you may return to your parents' house, taking sufficient riches with you for a comfortable life. Or, if any one of you wishes to remarry, just tell me who is going to be your new bridegroom. Each of you are free to exercise those options." Thereupon, my first wife expressed her wish to remarry and she named the bridegroom. I then let that man come up to me, and, holding my first wife in my left hand, and the libation jug in my right hand, I offered my wife to that man and sanctified their marriage. In relinquishing my first wife, who was still very young, to another man, I felt nothing in my mind. Venerable sir, my detachment in giving up my first wife to another man is the third extraordinary thing about me. 4. Venerable sir, whatever possessions I have in my house, I consider them to be assigned to the virtuous monastics. I hold back nothing from the Sangha. Venerable sir, this liberality towards the Sangha, in considering all my possessions as being assigned to the virtuous monastics, is the 4th extraordinary thing about me. 5. Venerable sir, whenever I attend to a monastic, I do so reverently and personally, but never irreverently. If that monastic teaches me a discourse, I listen reverentially, but never irreverently. If that monastic does not teach me a discourse, I teach a discourse to him. Venerable sir, my reverentially attending to monastics, reverentially listening to their discourses, and my teaching a discourse to the monastic who does not teach me, is the 5th extraordinary thing about me. 6. Venerable sir, whenever I invite the Sangha to my residence, devas would come to me and say, "Householder, such and such a monastic is emancipated both ways from the corporeal body, rupakaya, and the mental body, abhato bhagavamutta. Such and such a monastic has attained emancipation through full knowledge and insight, punna vimutta. such and such a monastic is one who has realized nibbana in his own person. Kaya Saki, such and such a monastic has attained to the three higher paths. Magga, and fruitions, Phala, through right view, Dhyapata, such and such a monastic is emancipated through faith, Sadhavimutta, such and such a monastic is one who follows faith, Sadhanusari, such and such a monastic is one who pursues Dhamma, Dhammanusari, such and such a monastic has morality, and is virtuous, such and such a monastic lacks morality and is vile. I do not think the devas coming to me to say these words is extraordinary. When I attend to the Sangha, it never occurred to me that such and such a monastic lacks morality, and so I will make only scant offering to him, or that such and such a monastic is virtuous and so I will make great offerings to him. I make offerings both to the virtuous monastics and the vile monastics in the same reverential spirit. Venerable Sir, my indiscriminate offering and attendance on both the virtuous and the vile monastics is the sixth extraordinary thing about me. 7. Venerable Sir, devas often come to me, saying, Householder, the fortunate one expounds the Dhamma which is excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent at the end. And I would say to those devas, O devas, whether you say so or not, the fortunate one expounds the Dhamma which is excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent in the end. I do not think that the devas coming to me to say those words is extraordinary. Venerable Sir, my indifference to the coming of devas to me and the experience of conversing with them is the seventh extraordinary thing about me. 8. Venerable Sir, in the event of my predeceasing the fortunate one's remarks about me such as, Uggata the Householder of Hatthaka has no fetters in him that tend to rebirth in the sensuous realm, will not be anything extraordinary. Venerable Sir, the fact that there is no fetter in me that tends to rebirth in the sensuous realm is the eighth extraordinary thing about me. Venerable Sir, I know I have these 8 extraordinary qualities. But I am not sure which 8 qualities the fortunate one sees in me that he calls marvelous. Thereafter, the monastic, having received alms food from Uggata the Householder, departed. He took his meal and then went to the Buddha, made obeisance to him, and sat in a suitable place. Sitting thus, he related to the Buddha the full details of the conversation that took place between him and Uggata the Householder. The Buddha said, Good, monastic. Anyone who could answer your questions well should be given these very answers that Uggata the Householder did. Monastic, I say that Uggata the Householder is endowed with those 8 extraordinary qualities that are marvelous. Monastics, note that Uggata the Householder has these very 8 marvelous qualities that he told you. In the collection of the numerical discourses, Anguttara Nikaya, discourses both the above 2 householders are called Ugga. Here we are leaning on the collection of the numerical discourses, Anguttara Nikaya, about the foremost disciples in calling the householder of Hatthaka, Uggata, in contradistinction to Ugga, the householder of Vesali. Since the noble and rare attributes of these 2 householders inspire devotion, these notes are somewhat more than summarized statements. (8) Sūramañtha the Householder. Aspiration in the past. The future Sūramañtha the Householder was born into a worthy family in the city of Hasavat, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. While listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a lay disciple being named by the Buddha as the foremost lay disciple who had firm conviction in the teaching. He aspired to that distinction, and, after making an extraordinary offering, he expressed his wish that at some future existence his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Sūramañtha was reborn in the Deva or human realms for 100,000 eons before being reborn into a rich man's family of Savatthi, during the time of Buddha Gautama. His name was Sūramañtha. When he came of age, he married and became a regular lay supporter of ascetics who were outside the Buddha's teaching. Early one morning, the Buddha, in his routine review of the world for individuals who were ready for awakening, saw the ripeness of the past merit of Sūramañtha the Householder to gain stream entry, Sotapati Magga. So, he went to Sūramañtha's house for alms food. Sūramañtha thought to himself, ascetic Gautama comes from a royal family and has earned a vast reputation in the world. Perhaps it is only proper for me to welcome him. Thinking thus, he went to the Buddha, made obeisance at his feet, took his alms bowl, and conducted him to a raised couch which was set aside for noble persons. He made offerings of food and after attending on him, sat in a suitable place. The Buddha taught a discourse, which suited the mental framework of Sūramañtha, at the end of which, he was established in stream entry, Sotapaddi Phala. After bestowing Sūramañtha with stream entry knowledge, the Buddha returned to the monastery. Then Mara thought, this Sūramañtha the householder belongs to my fold and is a follower of the ascetics which are outside the Buddha's teaching. But the Buddha has visited his house today. Why? Has Sūramañtha become a noble one, Arya, after hearing the Buddha's discourse? Has he escaped from my domain of sensuality? I must find out. Then, being possessed of powers of impersonating anyone, he assumed the form of the Buddha complete with the 32 marks of the great man and in perfect Buddha style of holding the alms bowl and the robe. In that deceitful impersonation, he stood at the door of Sūramañtha the householder. Sūramañtha wondered why the Buddha visited a second time, when he was informed by his attendants. The Buddha never comes without some good reason, he thought, and approached the impersonated Buddha in the belief that he was the real Buddha. After paying respects to the impersonated Buddha, he stood in a suitable place, and asked, "Venerable Sir, the fortunate one has just left this house after having a meal. For what purpose does the fortunate one come again?" The bogus Buddha, who was really Mara, said, "Lay supporter Sūramañtha, I made a slip in my discourse to you. I said that all of the aggregates are impermanent, suffering and insubstantial. But the 5 aggregates are not always of that nature. There are certain of the 5 aggregates that are permanent, stable and eternal." Sūramañtha, a stream enterer, was vexed by that statement. He pondered thus, this is a statement of most serious import. The Buddha never makes a slip in his speech, for he never utters a word without proper consideration. They say that Mara is the opponent of the Buddha. Surely this must be Mara himself. Thinking correctly thus, he asked bluntly, "You are Mara, are you not?" Mara was shocked and shaken as if struck with an axe because it was a confrontation by a noble one. His disguise fell off and he admitted it, "Yes, Sūramañtha, I am Mara." Sūramañtha rebuked him, "Wicked Mara, even 1,000 of your kind will not be able to shake my conviction. Buddha Gautama, in his discourse has said, all conditioned things are impermanent. And the Buddha's discourse has led me to stream entry, Sotapaddi Magga. Get out of here." He said it so sternly to Mara, snapping his fingers. Mara had no words to cover up his ruse, and vanished immediately. In the evening, Sūramañtha went to the Buddha and related the visit of Mara to him and what Mara had said, and how he had dealt him. "Venerable Sir," he said to the Buddha, "in this way has Mara attempted to shake my conviction." Foremost title achieved. Referring to this incident, the Buddha, during his residence at the Jetavana monastery, on the occasion of naming outstanding lay disciples in accordance with their merits, declared, "Etad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsiknavekapazana yedida srambaho." Monastics, among my lay disciples who have unshakable conviction in my teaching, Sūramañtha is the foremost. (9) Jīvaka the Physician. Aspiration in the past. The future Jīvaka was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Āḷavaka, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. While listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a lay disciple being named as the foremost among those who had personal devotion to the Buddha. He aspired to that distinction in a future time. After making an extraordinary offering, he expressed his wish before the Buddha, who then predicted its fulfillment. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Jīvaka was reborn in the Deva realm or the human realm for 100,000 eons, before being reborn, under strange circumstances, in the city of Rajagaha, during the time of Buddha Gautama. He was conceived in the womb of a courtesan named Āḷavaka, the conception being caused by Prince Ugga. It was the custom of courtesans to nurture only female children, whereas male children were discarded discreetly. Accordingly, Āḷavaka, the courtesan, had her newly born baby put on an old bamboo tray and thrown into a rubbish heap by a trusted servant without being noticed by anyone. The child was observed from a distance by Prince Ugga, who was on his way to attend on his father King Bimbisara. He sent his attendants, "Men, what is that thing surrounded by crows?" The men went to the rubbish heap and finding the baby, said, "My lord, it is a newly born baby boy." "Is he still alive?" "Yes, my lord, he is." Prince Ugga had the child taken to his royal residence and taken care of. As the prince's attendants replied to their master, "It is still alive, Jīvaka," the child was named Jīvaka. And since he was brought up by Prince Ugga, he was also called Jīvaka, Āḷavaka. Young Jīvaka, the adopted son of Prince Ugga, was sent to Tapussa for his education at the age of 16. He learned medicine and gained mastery of the subject. He became the king's physician. At one time, he cured King Kapajota of a grave illness, for which he was honored by that king with 500 cartloads of rice, 16,000 pieces of money of silver, a pair of fine clothes made in the province of Kasi, and 1,000 pieces of cloth to supplement it. At that time, the Buddha was staying in the mountain monastery on the side of Gajaka hill, near Rajagaha. Jīvaka, the king's physician, cured the constipation of the Buddha by administering a mild laxative. Then it occurred to Jīvaka, "It were well if all the 4 requisites of the fortunate one were my donations," and accordingly, he invited the Buddha to stay in his mango grove as a monastery. After curing the Buddha's illness, he offered the fine Kasi cloth to the Buddha and the 1,000 pieces of cloth that were supplementary to it were offered to the Sangha. This brief account of Jīvaka is based on the commentary on the collection of the numerical discourses, Uggata Nikaya. For a fuller account, the reader is urged to refer to the Vinaya, Vin MV8. Foremost title achieved. On one occasion, during the Buddha's residence at the Jetavana monastery when he conferred titles to distinguished lay disciples in accordance with their merit, he declared, "Itad aga bhikkave mama svakna upsikna pugalapasana yet eda Jīvako kamrabako." Monastics, among my lay disciples who have personal devotion, Jīvaka, the adopted son of Prince Ugga, is the foremost. The future Sūramañtha was reborn in the Deva or human realms for 100,000 eons before being reborn into a rich man's family of Savatthi, during the time of Buddha Gautama. His name was Sūramañtha. When he came of age, he married and became a regular lay supporter of ascetics who were outside the Buddha's teaching. Early one morning, the Buddha, in his routine review of the world for individuals who were ready for awakening, saw the ripeness of the past merit of Sūramañtha the Householder to gain stream entry, Sotapati Magga. So, he went to Sūramañtha's house for alms food. Sūramañtha thought to himself, "Ascetic Gautama comes from a royal family and has earned a vast reputation in the world. Perhaps it is only proper for me to welcome him." Thinking thus, he went to the Buddha, made obeisance at his feet, took his alms bowl, and conducted him to a raised couch which was set aside for noble persons. He made offerings of food and after attending on him, sat in a suitable place. The Buddha taught a discourse, which suited the mental framework of Sūramañtha, at the end of which, he was established in stream entry, Sotapati Phala. After bestowing Sūramañtha with stream entry knowledge, the Buddha returned to the monastery. Then Mara thought, "This Sūramañtha the householder belongs to my fold and is a follower of the ascetics which are outside the Buddha's teaching. But the Buddha has visited his house today. Why? Has Sūramañtha become a noble one, Arya, after hearing the Buddha's discourse? Has he escaped from my domain of sensuality? I must find out." Then, being possessed of powers of impersonating anyone, he assumed the form of the Buddha complete with the 32 marks of the great man and in perfect Buddha style of holding the alms bowl and the robe. In that deceitful impersonation, he stood at the door of Sūramañtha the householder. Sūramañtha wondered why the Buddha visited a second time, when he was informed by his attendants. The Buddha never comes without some good reason, he thought, and approached the impersonated Buddha in the belief that he was the real Buddha. After paying respects to the impersonated Buddha, he stood in a suitable place, and asked, "Venerable Sir, the fortunate one has just left this house after having a meal. For what purpose does the fortunate one come again? The bogus Buddha, who was really Mara, said, Lay supporter Sūramañtha, I made a slip in my discourse to you. I said that all of the aggregates are impermanent, suffering and insubstantial. But the 5 aggregates are not always of that nature. There are certain of the 5 aggregates that are permanent, stable and eternal. Sūramañtha, a stream enterer, was vexed by that statement. He pondered thus, this is a statement of most serious import. The Buddha never makes a slip in his speech, for he never utters a word without proper consideration. They say that Mara is the opponent of the Buddha. Surely this must be Mara himself. Thinking correctly thus, he asked bluntly, You are Mara, are you not? Mara was shocked and shaken as if struck with an axe because it was a confrontation by a noble one. His disguise fell off and he admitted it, Yes, Sūramañtha, I am Mara. Sūramañtha rebuked him, Wicked Mara, even 1,000 of your kind will not be able to shake my conviction. Buddha Gautama, in his discourse has said, all conditioned things are impermanent. And the Buddha's discourse has led me to stream entry, Sotapati Magga. Get out of here. He said it so sternly to Mara, snapping his fingers. Mara had no words to cover up his ruse, and vanished immediately. In the evening, Sūramañtha went to the Buddha and related the visit of Mara to him and what Mara had said, and how he had dealt him. Venerable Sir, he said to the Buddha, in this way has Mara attempted to shake my conviction. Foremost title achieved. Referring to this incident, the Buddha, during his residence at the Jetavana monastery, on the occasion of naming outstanding lay disciples in accordance with their merits, declared, Itad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsiknavekapazana yedida srambaho. Monastics, among my lay disciples who have unshakable conviction in my teaching, Sūramañtha is the foremost. Nakulapitu the Householder. Aspiration in the past. The future Nakulapitu was reborn into a worthy family in the city of Āḷavaka, during the time of Buddha Pajamuttara. While he was listening to a discourse by the Buddha, he saw a lay disciple being named by him as the foremost among those who were close to the Buddha. He aspired to that title. After making extraordinary offerings, he expressed his wish in front of the Buddha, who then predicted that his aspiration would be fulfilled. Discipleship in his last existence. The future Nakulapitu was reborn either in the Deva realm or the human realm for 100,000 eons until, during the time of Buddha Gautama, he was reborn into a rich man's family in Sūramañtha in the province of Bhagga. When he succeeded to the family estate, he and his wife were called by the name of their son Nakula, as the father of Nakula, Nakulapitu, and the mother of Nakula, Nakulamattu. The Buddha, on his tour of the country in the company of many monastics, arrived at Sūramañtha and was sojourning in the Bisaka forest. Sūramañtha, the sound of a crocodile, was the name of the town because, at the time of the founding of the town, a crocodile sound was heard. The forest was known as Bisaka because it was the domain of a female demon by the name of Bisaka. Nakulapitu and his wife Nakulamattu went to the Bisaka forest along with other people of the town to visit the Buddha. At the first sight of Buddha, the couple took him as their own son and prostrating themselves before him, saying together, Dear son, where have you been over this long time, away from us? Nakulapitu in the past 500 existences had been the father of the Bodhisattva, for 500 existences he had been his paternal uncle who was junior to his father, for 500 existences he had been his paternal uncle who was senior to his father, for 500 existences he had been his maternal uncle. Nakulamattu for the past 500 existences had been the mother of the Bodhisattva, for 500 existences she had been his maternal aunt who was junior to his mother, for 500 existences she had been his maternal aunt who was senior to his mother, for 500 existences she had been his paternal aunt. These long blood relations of the past existences had left such a strong sense of affection in the hearts of the Nakulapitu and Nakulamattu for the Buddha that they perceived him as their own son who had been somehow staying away from them. The Buddha allowed the couple to remain at his feet holding them for as long as they wished, and waited until such time they were satisfied emotionally with the joy of seeing him again. Then, when the parents of his past existences had gained a mental state of equanimity, the Buddha, knowing their mental framework and their inclination, taught them a discourse, at the end of which, they were established in the fruition of stream entry knowledge. On a later occasion, when the couple were advanced in age, they made another visit to Sūramañtha. The old couple invited the Buddha to their house and on the next day offered delicious food of various kinds. When the Buddha had finished his meal, the old couple approached him, made their obeisance, and sat in a suitable place. Then Nakulapitu said to him, "Venerable sir, since in my youth I married my wife, I had never been disloyal to her even in my thoughts, not to speak of being disloyal physically. Venerable sir, we wish to see each other in the present existence, and we wish to see each other in our future existences." 1446. Nakulapitu also said likewise to the Buddha, "Venerable sir, since in my youth I became the wife of Nakulapitu, I had never been disloyal to him, even in my thoughts, not to speak of being disloyal physically. Venerable sir, we wish to see each other in our present existence, and we wish to see each other in our future existences." The commentary to the collection of the numerical discourses, Ugga the Householder, gives only a brief account. We shall supplement it here. Thereupon, the Buddha said to them, "Lay supporters, if a certain couple wish to see each other in the present existence as well as in the future existences, their wishes will be fulfilled on these four conditions. 1. They should have the same degree of conviction in the teaching. 2. They should have the same degree of morality. 3. They should have the same degree of giving in generosity. And 4. They should have the same degree of intelligence." Then the Buddha uttered the following verses, and 4.55. 1-2. For that couple, both of whom possess conviction in teaching, who have a liberal mind towards those who come for help, who have restraint in thought, word, and deed, who use kind words towards each other, who lead a righteous life, benefits multiply, and a life of ease and comfort is their lot. Unfriendly people bear malice against such a couple with equal morality. 3. For such a couple with equal morality in good conduct who are desirous of sensual objects, living a life according to the Dhamma in the present existence, both of them find delight in this world and rejoice in the Deva realm. Foremost titles achieved. The above discourse stemming from the intimate statements made by the Nakulapitu couple is known as the first discourse about living in balance, Mahānāma Jīvaka Sutta, and 4.55. The discourse reveals the intimate relationship that existed between them and the Buddha in the nature of filial connection. The old couple evidently put great faith in and reliance on the Buddha, whom they considered as their own son. That was why they disclosed their inner sentiments to the Buddha, without any sense of diffidence. That was why, while the Buddha was staying in the Jetavana monastery and outstanding lay disciples were designated by him as foremost in their own merit, he declared, "Itad aga bhikkhave mama svakna upsiknavasakna yadida Nakulapitu gahapati." Monastics, among my lay disciples who are close to the Buddha, Nakulapitu, the householder, is the foremost.